In this lesson, we'll take a look at how we can use sculpt layers to add high frequency skin detail in a very flexible way. So we're going to look at sort of two different things in this lesson. So the first thing is we want to start to add some really high frequency bump and detail across this guy's skin. Okay, we've got kind of the overall features sculpted in, we've got some of the wrinkles, but you can see in these areas there's not really a lot of texture to the skin. So we want to do that, but we also want to look at a way that we can start to add details, and this can apply to this sort of detail or details that we've sculpted here. We want to apply that detail in a flexible way. So if we come up here to our object list, right above that you'll see layers. Let's go ahead, click on that, and you'll see sculpt. And right now there's just one little cube here, so we don't have any sculpt layers on this yet. All right, so sculpt layers exist on a particular level, so we're up here at the top level. Let's go ahead and add a sculpt layer by hitting this little plus button here. So with this sculpt layer selected, anything that we now sculpt is going to be contained within this sculpt layer. Okay, so we'll see the advantages of that as we go on. Just make sure that you have that sculpt layer selected instead of your base down here. You want to have the layer selected. All right, let's take a look at how we can add some sort of high frequency detail. So we're going to go to sculpt, and I'm going to use a stamp to add this. And so I'm going to select this sort of stamp, the lower left. And so stamp image is on. We can turn on randomize, and that just means as we paint across the surface, it'll randomize the stamping based on the rotation, the position, up or down, left, right, the size, and the intensity here. And you can see I can change those sliders. So if I want to really vary that, really vary one aspect of it but not the others, you can set that all here and make sure randomize is on. So now we'll come in here, and I'm going to kind of dial my strength down a little bit, maybe the brush size down a little, and then just real lightly as we come across here I can start to add this kind of skin detail. And really what I want to do is I don't want to disrupt the wrinkling that we already have or any of the facial features. I just want to add a little bit of that variation and roughness on the skin. So we can come in here and just come around and just kind of cover it. I probably don't want to put any on the lips, but down here on the chin I'll put a little bit. And I've got a low strength, and also I'm not pushing very hard on the pen, and so I'm getting a very light covering of this, even in these large open areas. You can see how this is really, we don't have a lot of wrinkles in here, but just adding this little bit of detail kind of breaks things up a bit. Okay, come around here, we'll kind of do the same thing, and I'll go through it pretty quickly here. Kind of do the same thing down here on the feet. Okay. And we'll come in here. And so let's say that I've added some on the lips, and I don't really want to do that, or some other area. Because this is on a layer, I can come in and I can erase the detail from that layer. So you can see as I erase that, it goes back to that base geometry. It just erases that detail that I've added. You can also mask that detail out. So you could have the detail in there, but just mask it out. We can also come in here, and this is one of the advantages now that we've got that detail on here. If we decide, you know what, I don't really want it to be that, I don't want it to stick out that much, we can go into strength, and we can dial the strength slider down. If we take it all the way down to 0, that detail goes all the way away. So let's say I'll dial this up to maybe 84%. If I ever want to turn the visibility off, I can just hit this little button and it'll turn the visibility of that layer off, kind of taking us back where we started. But I'm going to turn that back on. Let's say now I want to add another sculpt layer. So you can start to add a bunch of different kinds of detail here and then dial them in until you get something that looks like what you want. So I'm going to get maybe this one. And because we know that we can dial in the strength, you can sort of overshoot sometimes, make it a little bit more intense than you know you're going to want it, because then you have some flexibility and wiggle room as far as, you know, dialing that in. So we want some sort of general bumpiness here, coming across the face, and maybe down across here. And I'm adding this in a separate layer so that I now have flexibility to blend that together with the detail underneath and with the base sculpt So maybe coming in there, coming across the bottom, we'll add a little bit on the feet. You can see, you'll definitely want to have your highest subdivision level because your lower levels are not going to be able to retain this kind of detail. You can see where you can see all the little bumps there. That's not going to happen if your mesh is at too low of a subdivision level. So it'll become apparent if that's the case. And then you just bump it up another level, add another level if you don't have one. Let's add a little bit on the arms, kind of coming out here, and a little bit of bumpiness coming out here. Okay, and now this is on that second layer, so we could again erase part of it out. We can dial that in. You could also get other ones here. We could come in here like this and start to add these little individual bumps, kind of coming up across here, these tinier little bumps. Or you could also invert that and create little pores coming across. Get a smaller brush size, and I'm just holding down Control to push those pores into the surface rather than pulling them out. So you could do that too to add a little bit of detail there. So you've got the bumps and then you've got some pores in the surface. Now this is on that second layer, so it's going to be combined with that detail. So anything that you want to separate out, you can put on a different layer. And anything it's okay if it's together, you can put on the same layer. Okay. Now let's add another layer, and I want to add some larger bumps to this guy. So for this, I'm going to turn off the stamp, and I'm going to turn off symmetry too because I don't want these to be symmetrical. And I'm going to come up to the top, and I'm going to dial the strength down a little bit, and I'm just going to start to add little bumps in here. And some of them I'm going to make stick out a little bit more, and some of them I won't push as hard and just let them kind of sit just off the surface. So I'll do a few at a certain size, and then let's modify our size here. I'm going to put a couple coming up, on the brow, and then maybe on the chin. And just make sure that they're asymmetrical. It'll really add a lot to the model. And then, up here on the top, I really want to make sure to add several of these big bumps. Okay. So something like that. Again, we talked about the design and how you can sort of customize it. So if you don't want that to happen, or if you want a different kind of detail, maybe you want sort of ridges coming along the head instead of these bumps, you can do that too. Something like that. And now these are on this separate layer, so if you wanted to turn those bumps off, you could turn them off. Or we could also sort of lower them down a little bit. But I think the height is good, and I want to make sure, again, to get a few down here on the face, because that'll really help set it off, make it look a little bit more realistic, having that asymmetry in there. All right. So that's a look at adding sculpt layers. Now, once you're done with your sculpt layers, if you want to, you can come in and you can actually flatten everything down. So if you want to retain the flexibility of having those sculpt layers in there, you can keep them. But when you're done, you've got it dialed in, you can bake everything down into this base by going in here, and you can either merge visible with the ones that are visible, or you can flatten all the layers down. That'll get rid of the ability to go back in and sculpt on those particular layers, and everything that you've done here, basically what it looks like, will be baked down into this lowest level. Okay, so in the next lesson, let's start to add some additional geometry. So what happens if we want to add things like eyes? We can do that here in Mudbox, and we'll take a look at how we can do that in the next lesson.